Hello, everyone. I am here with the infamous Dr. Laura Markham. My name is Tammy Shamoon, and I am the co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology. And we are here to speak with Dr. Laura Markham about her book, Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids. I was just telling Dr. Markham, this is one of the first books I really dug into when I found out I was going to be a mom. Dr. Markham is the founder and editor of Aha Parenting, one of my favorite blogs to read and to give other clients of mine to read. She has her PhD in clinical psychology from Columbia University, and she's an international speaker and best-selling author. So thank you for joining us, Dr.
I'm
Markham.
delighted to be with you.
Yeah, no, we're huge fans of you at the Institute because so much of what you do is empowering, I think, both for kids and for parents. It's got a beautiful positive spin to the work. And to me, it screams resiliency, like for families and for kids. And I'm just curious, I know you obviously have you've been doing this work for some time, but what really inspired you to write this particular book?
What inspired me to write this particular book was just wanting to reach more parents with support. Parents don't get enough support in our society. And, we expect parents to do the hardest job in the world with no training, with almost no support. And it's all on them to work through their own issues from childhood so they can show up to be the parents they want to be. And meanwhile, we give them, this sacred responsibility. We hand them a human being, and their job is to, raise that human into someone who will, be able to contribute their unique gifts to the world, be a good person in the world. And also, I mean, at the moment, brush their teeth and, wash their hands for dinner and clean up their toys and
Yeah.
not hit their brother and, be someone who cooperates with us. And it's a tall order. And parents are not given the information or the support they need. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a difficult job. And one of the things that I value most about your work is this piece about parents working through their issues. That is so huge. And you do a wonderful job of this. Campaign does. Circle of Security talks about this. There's some key contributors to this. And so I know wasn't on our list, but could you speak to just a little bit about that when I'm talking about parents kind of bringing their baggage into their parenting and why it's important that they have to work through that?
Well, we all know that we can find ourselves saying things or doing things that later we're sorry about. So the question is, if you're sorry about those things, well, then why did you do them, right? Well, because we were driven to do them by some, you know, um, not completely conscious thing going on in our own mind, emotions, right? And often it's something from our own childhood.
Yeah.
So, we do things. So much of every relationship actually happens outside the realm of consciousness because you're not thinking, you're not fully present every moment, noticing everything that happens. And if you were, you'd probably be pretty stilted, right? I mean, the truth is, we're in the moment, we're responding. Our kid throws something at us, we try to catch it, whether it's emotional or physical. The thing is, if we have not worked through our stuff, what comes to the fore in those moments is our baggage. If we're, people say, "Oh, just pay attention to your instincts and you'll be a good parent." Actually, that's if you knew which were your instincts, that's not even bad advice, right? Your natural instincts are to protect your child, right? The problem is that we can't tell the difference between those instincts and our automatic response that comes from having been yelled at as a child or hit as a child or over controlled as a child. We might think we're being helpful to our child when we say, "Oh, no, no, be careful, don't do that." But we're actually making them more anxious, right?
Yeah.
And it's from our own childhood. So there's so much that we're not even aware of really until parents will say to me, "I was a calm person until I had children." you know? And yeah, they have a way of pushing all our buttons. And the reason they can do that is that those buttons were installed in early childhood. And so children will push those buttons. That's where we suddenly become aware that we have some work to do on ourselves. Wouldn't it be great if we could all do the work prior to having kids? But often we don't. And so the hidden work of parenting, I think, is that we do the work on ourselves to grow ourselves up, because we need to be the grown-ups in our home. We need to give our children, we all want to give our children everything we can so they can thrive. And one of the things we need to give them is a more mature, emotionally generous version of ourselves. And that's only possible if we've actually done a little work on ourselves, usually.
It's interesting because I run a clinic and we have a lot of child psychologists here. We have a couple different offices, and I'm not doing as much clinical work now, one-on-one, more consulting. But if I had my wish list when parents come in to do an intake, I want to put them in counseling too. It's not that I don't want to see their kids, but I know the long-term success of a lot of mental health interventions, it's children, hinges on the parents' ability to do the work. And often, if we don't have that buy-in and we don't have parents who are quite aware of what's going on inside of themselves, it can be very difficult to shift the child from a long-term perspective, if that makes sense. It's fine when they're in the therapy with a therapist, but it's
Right.
difficult once they leave therapy. And if the environment hasn't changed and that relationship hasn't changed or shifted, or the parent isn't regulated, the child it reverts back and they think they need to be in therapy. And I'm like, if everyone just got the counseling, we would make some. I know it's not always possible, but it is just something that can
I
be
just
very,
think
yeah.
it's so important for parents to come into the therapy with the child,
Yeah.
so that the therapist can helpfully notice and help the parent to notice the dynamic between the parent and child. And often it doesn't take much for the therapist to give, yeah, you know this, I'm sure you do this regularly. It doesn't take much for the therapist to give the parent some pointers on what just happened and how the parent maybe shut down the child's, when the child was trying to ask for something they needed, or when the child was showing the parent how upset they are and the parent was scared by it and shut it down without even realizing that's what they were doing, or the child was actually initiating some sort of closeness with the parent, but they did it in a rough way because they didn't know how to do it. And the parent didn't understand what was being initiated, right? All those kinds of interactions, the parent can learn so much and then take that into the future with the child, and it can transform the relationship, just as you're saying, but only if the parent participates.
Yeah, and being open and receptive to that. One of the things that I always try to reframe, and this comes from other therapists I've heard speak, other clinicians, that kids aren't, and which is going to lead me to my next question. Kids aren't attention seeking; they're connection seeking.
Yes.
And you talk a lot about connection before correction, which I really, really love. That's easy for parents to hold on to, easier for them to remember. Can you speak and explain this to our audience, what you mean by that connection before correction?
Well, let's think about the times in our lives when we were maybe not on the right track.
Mhm.
If someone came over and said to you, I'm just imagining, imagine you, the person who's listening to my Tammy and Laura's conversation right now. Um, you're on the wrong track with something. You might even sense you're on the wrong track. You might even know it's a little against the rules, but you're doing it anyway because you really want something, or because you're upset about something, or whatever. And somebody says to you, um, what you're this is terrible that you're doing this. Stop that right now. How could you be doing such a thing? No, I'm going to show you the right way to do that. Wouldn't you recoil a little bit from that? Wouldn't you have your hackles up? Wouldn't you be like, no, don't push me around. Don't tell me what to do. Whereas
Yeah,
if you,
that or a freeze response, like children become
yes,
utterly passive but terrified, and that's not a
yes,
good stress response either.
yes, good
Yeah.
point. Good point. So they either go into fight or they go into freeze.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and imagine instead that someone comes over to you and says, oh, I see you're doing X. I guess you're doing X because you really wanted XYZ to happen and you thought this would get you that, huh? Yeah. What do you think about this? What do you think about doing X? Yeah, not such a good idea, right? And, how's it working out for you, X? I mean, there are all kinds of questions you could ask. They could even set a clear limit. It could even be, I'm sorry, but you can't do this. You can't do this, whatever this thing is. I see why you might have wanted to, and you still can't. It's not a good idea. Here's why. And you would be like, well, I wish I could do X, but you're right. It's not such a good idea. And you would stop, and you wouldn't hate that person. You would be like, yeah, you might bristle. You might be like, well, I wish I could do X. You might even cry. I mean, parents have to be comfortable that their child might be disappointed they can't do X. They might just cry about it. But that disappointment being expressed is completely fine. We're all disappointed many times in the course of a day, right? Oops, somebody just took my parking space. Oh no, my child once again, threw their cup across the room. There's plenty of disappointments for all of us in the course of a day. Children don't have a context for those disappointments. Yes, they overreact, especially if felt like they've had a hard time getting their needs met and things aren't working for them and they feel close to tears, right? But if you can connect before you correct, you're more likely to have influence with them. It's that
Right.
simple. You're more likely to cooperate.
Well,
You
you're
strengthen
really
the relationship.
priming those attachment instincts, and kids,
Yeah.
if they feel and they're in right relationship with you, will follow. But
Yeah.
if there is that piece that, like, and Dr. Neufeld talks about this counter will, like if kids
Mhm.
aren't feeling connected, they're designed to be oppositional. Like
Yes.
they're meant to follow the lead of someone whom they like is attuned to them and they have a loving relationship with. So if we really want to move our children, that you have to prime those instincts of like, I want to follow you. And
Right.
then like you've set them up for success right from the
Precisely.
get-go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's yeah. And the other piece before I let you go, I don't want to take up too much of your time, is this idea of coaching versus controlling. I really liked that.
Mm. Well, we are not really taught that connection is the number one skill in parenting, right? We're not taught that. We don't understand that all of our influence with our child comes from that connection. So we automatically, when we get upset or worried about what our child is doing, we automatically jump in with control.
Yeah, fear, like lots of fear
It is
there.
coming from
Yeah.
our own fear. That's absolutely right. When we come from fear, we stop seeing our child as a full human being with their own set of fears and desires and needs. And instead we see them as an object to be controlled. And
Yeah.
we're using punishments or threats or sometimes bribes. And threats undermine your relationship with your child. So they don't end up giving you more influence. So your child cooperates less, not more, right?
Yeah.
That you're not, it doesn't work to threaten. And you also have to escalate your punishments. And bribes, not so good either. You end up doing things that are against your value system. Yes, have another cookie, right? Have some more screen time. And you also have to escalate the bribes.
Yeah.
So neither one really works. If instead you coach your child to be their best self, they're more likely to be their best self. Rewards and punishment assume the child has the power to do what you're asking. Most of the time, children don't have the power to do what you're asking. You can sometimes frighten them into stopping what they're doing because they're scared. But
Yeah.
then later they have all that baggage from that frightening interaction that they will end up acting out onto their little sister or whatever. It's not actually helpful in the long run to helping your child learn to regulate their emotions. And if they can't regulate emotions, they can't regulate behavior.
No.
So coaching is what helps kids regulate their behavior because you're coaching them. Emotion coaching is a specific kind of coaching where you're helping children learn to manage their emotions. And it doesn't come from, now you manage your emotions. It comes from the
Just like when you
empathy.
say calm down, that
Yes,
works every time,
yes,
right? Tell someone to
exactly,
calm down, they calm
exactly.
right down.
I love it. I love it. So emotion coaching, we know starts with accepting all the emotions. We don't accept the behavior. No, they can't hit you just because they're angry, but they're allowed to be angry. They're allowed to tell you they're angry. And if you can avoid it turning into a fight or a power struggle, if you can notice your buttons are getting pushed, take a deep breath, calm yourself down. You can stay present in that discussion and compassionate enough that your
We want
child
to
will
Yeah, you want to be the calm you want to see in your child. It has to
Exactly.
start from you. They're
Exactly.
learning from you. They're watching you, and
Exactly.
yeah,
And they feel safer when you can be that calm. They feel safer. So even if they are starting off angry when they're trying to tell you how angry they are about something, notice what's happening to my voice. They're angry. I'm mad at you. And then as you say, oh my goodness, you're so upset about this, your child is shifting to a tone of voice that's more like, of course I'm upset. And
yeah,
notice the
sit
tears
down.
that are in the voice. The tears
Yeah.
are there because the child is moving beyond the anger to what's behind the anger, the tears
Mhm.
and fears. That's emotion coaching. There are other kinds of coaching. You might teach your child skills to interact with their sibling. You might set
Mm,
up the environment so your child can thrive. That means maybe earlier bedtime. It means more time for one-on-one time with you. It means maybe less screen time. It means feed them before they get super hungry. So, all kinds of things go into setting up the environment so the child could thrive. But all of that is contained when I say coaching,
yeah,
coaching
absolutely.
instead of controlling.
Right, and that's what I'm hearing is that's a lot of that is co-regulation for our kids,
Yes.
and we know the research is very clear. When children co-regulate, eventually that is what leads to self-regulation. That young children don't regulate well on their own; they can numb out, but
Yeah.
really it's when we can stay with them in those hard moments and stay present, and they kind of downshift from those the big, the angry tears and the tantrum. They downshift into this like quiet, sad, weeping mess on your lap.
Yes.
That's like the gold right there. And then my son tells me all the time, my sad feelings are not so big anymore. I feel better. And because we always say
Oh,
crying makes your body feel better. And he'll just tell me that now. And it's always like, took 3 years, but here we are. He can tell me that now.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I really appreciate you going into that. Like I said, I think that there's often missing from, and although well intended, a lot of therapists really breeze over that parent work. And to me, I'm just like, you must go there with the parents because that's like the ultimate change we see is with the system, and then we can see those really beautiful long-term outcomes that we want. It's hard
With the
work though.
family system, with the parent being able to
Yeah,
to come
yeah,
in differently, because if the parent escalates the drama, the child feels unsafe and goes more into a state of emergency
yeah,
and with escalated emotion. Whereas if the parent can restore safety, emotional safety, then the child can make that transition, as you say, to what really needs to be worked through. Yeah. And
absolutely.
this we know this from brain research. This is the best time in history to be a parent.
Mhm.
We've had parents for thousands and thousands of generations, and parents haven't had any tools to work with, really. They haven't known much about brain development. They haven't known what's going to help their child. They've been on autopilot just trying to keep food on the table, right? Through most of human history. But now we know how the brain works, brain development, how the brain responds to other brains, right? Co-regulation
Mhm.
is about two nervous systems in a dance. And when you can provide the embrace, the emotional um, comfort, soothing, safety, generosity to your child, then your child's nervous system can blossom into a child and then an adult eventually who can regulate themselves.
Yeah. Oh, we have to end that interview right there. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Um, I mean, I would tell everyone who's watching, follow Dr. Markham's blog, Aha Parenting. We steal your entries quite often and put repost in our
I'm
Instagram.
delighted.
We love it, and we love your books and your work. And I'm actually going to start digging into your book on siblings next because I have a blended family. So far they
Wonderful.
seem to be doing decently, but I think we could always use some work in that area, having a blended family and making sure kids are all kind of peacefully coexisting with as little tension as possible that can exist in a blended situation. So thank you again, and we are so looking forward to your keynote presentation at our symposium this spring in April, and then we're having you back in the fall, so we get to see you 2 more times after this.
I can't wait.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.